Hawkgirl is a limited mythic champion in DC Dark Legion. She's exclusive to the Bleed. You will be able to obtain her with World Anvil fragments. Today we're doing a whale or skip video on her, so we'll talk about her kit, tag synergies. We'll talk about some of the champions that have a lot of synergy with her. And in general, I talk about whether you should whale or skip on this champion. In the past, I'd tell you where she shows up specifically in the Bleed calendar, but considering the fact that the calendar has been kind of split off between the various different servers because of the Superman family event, it's kind of difficult to tell you where she'll end up showing up on your server. So right now she is available on the global launch servers, so 206 through probably the low, or I would say the high 200s. She's probably going to be available for you right now. If not, she will be soon. And we'll monitor kind of where she ends up showing up in some of the more recent servers, like this. I'm calling them the summer launch servers. But hopefully before Hawkgirl comes to the Bleed on your server, you'll be able to watch this video and see whether or not you like her kit enough to invest in her. Now, in general, I'm not sold on Hawkgirl's kit, at least not right now as of the time of this video. I do think she has a lot of synergy and potential with the Birds of Prey, and she definitely is a very tanky champion. So, you know, if you're wanting to go for a specific build, if you're going for your Justice League type lineup, or obviously Birds of Prey, so if you're investing heavily in your Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy early on in your account, then Hawkgirl might be worth considering. For my account and for my team comps, I really didn't need another warrior champion, or, you know, in a lot of cases, we kind of like view her as more of a tank than anything else. They nerfed her unique legacy piece, the crit damage on it, so it's much more of a defensive minded kit now, and she's not going to be a win condition for your team. She might be able to help your win condition stay alive whenever they finally add a win condition for the Birds of Prey team, but she's definitely not the win condition for the team. We had kind of hoped that her AoE was going to be really good for a lot of boss fights, but I think unless you have her at high yellow stars or full red stars, you're just not going to get the damage output that you would like to get. So the other thing I would point out, I've talked to the community management team about this champion in the past, and it seems that, you know, like the idea around her kit is a little bit more defensive minded. And I think that's typically the view they take with these warrior champions. They're kind of, a lot of us in the community view these warriors as kind of off tanks. You know, Superman being kind of the exception right now, where he actually is a win condition as well and can do significant single target damage. So, you know, there's always going to be outliers, but in general, Hawkgirl is a champion that, you know, I'm kind of on the fence on, like, you know, is it a whale or a skip? For most rosters, she's going to be a skip, just because there's just so many other champions that you can choose from and build your roster around that you want to be spending those World Anvil fragments on. And, you know, based on where she shows up in the Bleed, there's just too many other champions that you're probably going to go for. So you really have to decide, and you can take a look at my Bleed strategy guide infographic and make a determination whether you want to include Hawkgirl in your farming strategy. But for most players, even light spenders, but especially for free-to-play players, in the first 6 months that you're playing the game, you're going to have to choose somewhere between 4 and 6 Bleed champions that you can go after, meaning that you're going to have to skip, you know, probably 6 to 8 champions as well. And so, you know, you have to look at all those champions, kind of the full body of what's available, and decide whether Hawkgirl is one of the best 4 to 6 champions in that lineup for what you're trying to do. In my opinion, I don't think that's the case, but I'm definitely curious to see what some of you folks on the global launch servers who are pulling for Hawkgirl now are able to come up with for her. So, you know, leave a comment down below. Let me know what types of teams you're running Hawkgirl with and what kind of success you've had with running her in all the various game modes. Well, let's take a look at her tag synergies. So I mentioned Hawkgirl is going to be Birds of Prey. So if you deploy 3 to 5 Birds of Prey champions, it's going to increase their lifesteal. So they're going to be able to stay alive and sustain a lot better than most other champions. She's also Justice League, so you'll be able to use Hawkgirl in a Superman lineup potentially. And if you deploy 3, 4, or 5 Justice League champions, it's going to increase those champions' attack and HP. And of course, we have Weapon Master, which is going to increase champions' attack as well. So, definitely a lot of synergy with increasing attack. If you're able to squeeze her into a lineup that fits all 3 of those tag synergies, it might actually be pretty good. And in fact, I've got a couple of friends who have invested in Hawkgirl significantly because they came into the game and it was kind of one of the first bleed champions that they had available to them. So they ended up, investing significantly. They're running lineups that had, things like Hawkgirl, Harley, Poison Ivy, Batman, and Green Arrow. So, you're trying to get the Justice League and Birds of Prey synergies together, which ends up, being actually pretty good for some game modes. For example, if you needed like a second PvP, like 3v3 team, or even in some of the combat cycle bosses, it might be, a halfway decent comp. But let's take a look at Hawkgirl's kit. So Hawkgirl's ultimate is called Dive Bomb. She's going to jump into the air and slam down. She's going to do physical damage. And it's actually a significant amount of physical damage at full 5 red stars, but it's going to be an AoE attack. And when she casts this skill, she's going to gain super armor, and she'll also recover some healing based on the amount of damage that she deals. So a lot of self-sustain in the kit here, especially with that lifesteal. Her first basic skill is going to be called Hurricane Force. Now, this is another AoE damage ability, and she's going to deal physical damage based on a percentage of her attack, and she's also going to pull enemies in. So it is a control effect, which is always going to be good for PvP or for really any fight where there's a lot of enemies on the battlefield. She's going to take a lot of the heat off of your other champions. And if you invest in the Multiversal Force talent for this ability, it's going to reduce the cooldown of the ability, so she's going to be able to cycle it a lot faster. The next skill is called Nth Degree, and this ability, Hawkgirl is going to charge her weapon, and she's going to deal physical damage equal to percentage of her attack to nearby enemies. Not really an impactful ability. This one, again, if you invest in the Multiversal Force talent, is going to reduce the cooldown of it. So, definitely investing in her force is going to allow her to do damage a lot more quickly. So it will add up over time. And then we have Energy Absorption. And so this one, at the start of the battle, Hawkgirl is going to gain a shield. And this is going to be equal to 6% of her max HP for every Birds of Prey ally present, up to a maximum of 30 HP, 30% of max HP. And every time she casts her ultimate, she'll gain a shield equal to 10% or to a percentage of her HP for several seconds. So again, leaning into that sustain, you got your lifesteal, you got your shield that you're going to be able to obtain if you're running Birds of Prey. And then when you cast your ultimate, you'll gain additional shields as the battle goes on. And if you invest in your Multiversal Force talent here, you'll see for the first time we're getting something that's going to like truly ramp up your attack. So this one definitely is going to be important for, building Hawkgirl for the long term, trying to get that crit rate up so she can do more crit damage. And then her global skill is called Thanagarian's Might. This is going to increase all champions HP by 1% and warrior champions HP by 1%. And that will go up as you scale your champion higher and get her to the 3-star level at each star level. On paper, this kit reads really well. It reads like a kit that should be doing a decent amount of damage in addition to the sustain it's able to do. Unfortunately, I think really just kind of falls flat. And that's because there's just not enough damage output at the lower levels. Obviously, you can see here that I have a 2 blue star version of Hawkgirl, and I don't really have any force invested in her at all. So you take my opinion at the highest level with a grain of salt. But I have talked to several people who have heavily invested into Hawkgirl, people that have her fully maxed out at red stars, and they kind of echo the sentiments that I've talked about here as well. But talking about her force tree, the types of things that you'll want to invest in if you're wanting to push her to the highest level, obviously the crit rate force talent is going to be really important. So that's the energy absorption enhanced. And, I would recommend trying to get that one maxed out as quickly as you can. You would also want to get this crit rate boost, which is in the bottom left. You want to get that one maxed out as quickly as you can as well. You want to get her dodge as high as you can. Dodge is incredibly important on the champions who have it available to them. It's going to allow them, again, just more sustainability, the ability to get away from other champions' attacks is going to be incredibly efficient. And then I always say anytime you're able to upgrade the attack percentage multiversal force talent, that's going to be helpful for the long term. Short term, obviously the other just kind of base attack is going to be fairly important, but these attack percentage ones, I always focus on those first just to get them out of the way. And pretty simple force talents that you're going to go after for Hawkgirl. As far as gear, I think you really want to lean into attack and just damage dealing as much as possible with this champion. So your crit rate, crit damage, energy gain would be good for Hawkgirl, and then just base attack are all going to be very important. You already have plenty of ways to sustain with this champion, so it really doesn't make a ton of sense to try to focus or lean into those things for Hawkgirl. I think trying to get more attack on her is going to be much more beneficial in the long run. And as far as legacy items that you'll want to use on her, obviously the most important is going to be the Thanagarian Mace. So this one is going to have attack and HP percent, and then it's going to do a couple of additional things. So it's going to increase your AoE damage by 15% or by a percentage just by virtue of being equipped. And then every time Hawkgirl casts her ultimate, attack is going to increase by a percentage for a certain duration. And then we have emergency shield. So at the start of every battle, her HP is going to increase by 10%. And anytime her health drops below 50% for the first time, so I guess the first time her health drops below 50%, she's going to gain a shield equal to a percentage of her max HP. So again, just kind of that whole theme of shields. She's able to generate a lot of shields throughout the battle and keep herself alive. But, ultimately, I would say if you're going to wail on Hawkgirl, if you're going to get her past blue stars, so purple, yellow, or red stars, I really think that her unique legacy item is a must, and you really need to invest in this thing as quickly as possible. So, if you're going to go after her, make sure that you have some magic eyes saved up so that you can get the Thanagarian Mace to at least 5 white stars. And I think that's going to give you the best opportunity to do well with this champion. If you're not able to go after that, or if you're kind of like saving up for it, I think there's a few replacements that are, worth your while. Obviously, the first one is going to be the not so huge hammer. So you're going to get, flat attack percentage here, and you're also going to get a massive amount of crit damage, especially at the higher levels. And I think this one is a pretty solid choice for Hawkgirl. An honorable mention that you actually get given to you for free now when you start the game, and for all of us who have already been playing, we got a free copy of it as well. The Honking Huge Hammer, which is Harley Quinn's unique legacy item. It does have crit rate and attack percentage on it. And I think it's one that you could reasonably consider for Hawkgirl. Just getting that crit rate much higher is just going to guarantee that you're able to, increase that damage output as much as possible. And then there are a couple of defensive, there's actually a lot of legacy pieces that kind of make a little bit of sense with Hawkgirl's kit. Sometimes you have a champion who really there's only like a handful, like 2 or 3 things that I would recommend that you use, but it just depends on how you're going to build her. I think Gabriel Horn makes a lot of sense because, you know, you're getting a decent amount of HP. You're getting that energy gain, so she's going to be cycling her ult a lot faster. And then she's also going to increase all allies' attack for the first 20 seconds of the battle. So could be helpful in PvP battles as well as training sim to try to get a little bit extra damage right off the bat. And then I think another legacy piece that actually goes hand in hand with the way her kit is set up is something like Prometheum Claws, where you're getting base attack percent and crit resistance, which is important up on the front lines. And then it's also going to increase base attack percentage through the skill deadly digits. And when your HP drops below 50%, you're going to gain a shield equal to a percentage of max HP. This only triggers once per battle, but I think it is significant in terms of just keeping her alive and, you know, generating self-sustained for the champion. Now, as far as synergy goes with teams, I think she's going to do well in just about any lineup that you put together for like a full Justice League team, especially Justice League Weapon Master teams. And I really don't think you can go wrong with any Justice League lineup with Hawkgirl, especially if you need a little bit of extra damage, or especially if you need a little bit of extra sustain and just kind of like tankiness up front. And of course, the true recommended lineup for Hawkgirl is going to be Birds of Prey. I mentioned some of the hybrid teams that you can put together. So you'll have something like, you know, Hawkgirl, Harley, Ivy, along with Batman and Green Arrow or Superman, something like that. Like, you're going to need a win condition for the team who's going to be able to put out a decent amount of damage output from the back line, or, you know, or just in general, someone who's going to be able to take the enemy to task. I don't, as far as like where she ends up being best for, you know, typically I try to cover combat cycle and meta brawl. I do not think that Hawkgirl is set up really well for combat cycle. You know, she'll be able to give you some decent sustain, but most of the Guardian champions, like the tank style champions, just don't fare well in any of the combat cycle fights. There's a couple of them where you kind of need some of that up front, like Devastator probably comes to mind, but usually she's just not going to do well there. I think she definitely works well in Training Simulator, but to be honest, most champions have a niche in Training Simulator on some of the levels. And then obviously she is a pretty good shutdown candidate for trying to control Legion of Doom, and Legion of Doom seems to be the meta for a lot of global launch servers. So I do think that she has the potential to lock down your Sinestro and or like primarily Deathstroke in PvP and try to keep him at bay, but just depends on how quickly her ult goes off compared to Deathstroke. And you really got to do that very quickly. So energy gain will probably be pretty important for that type of strategy. But just in general, that control where she's able to bring everyone into her and take the focus off of your win conditions and keep them from getting killed is going to make her a really good candidate for a meta brawl team for sure. That's going to wrap up this well or skip video. Again, I actually really like the way the kit is written for Hawkgirl. She has potential. You know, I think a lot of champions, we get access to them on the earlier servers, and we just don't know what their full potential is. Yeah, Supergirl comes to mind in that respect, because when she first came to the game, she really just didn't have a lot of synergy out there. There weren't many other champions she could work with, but once Crypto and Superboy came along, it really catapulted her to become one of the best champions in the game, in my opinion. I'm wondering if we just haven't seen the champions that are going to come to the game that will make Hawkgirl better than she is currently. I definitely want to see that. You know, I like all of these iconic Justice League champions and want to see them in the meta. So, you know, good luck with your polls, and if you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Helps with the algorithm. It also gives you notifications whenever I publish new DC Dark Legion content. And if you don't, that's perfectly fine. I will see you in the next video.